Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you by the Become a Super Learner Masterclass. Now, I've been telling you guys about the Masterclass for a few weeks now, so I'm actually just going to take a step back and let a good friend of mine tell you guys about his opinion on the Masterclass.
Hi, I'm Nelson Dellis, four-time USA memory champion and a huge fan of the Super Learner Masterclass. You know, when I started memory techniques years ago, I wish that I had all the resources that are available on this course. Jonathan does a great job teaching it, and it's a fantastic course, and I highly recommend it. It'll take you just as far as I am without as much time that I had to put in. So enjoy it, get into it, and keep your memory active.
To learn more, to sign up for a free trial with no credit card required, or to redeem an exclusive discount for podcast listeners only, please visit jle.vi/learn or visit becomeasuperlearner.com. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to today's show where we are going to be talking about magic mushrooms. Not that kind of magic mushrooms, but still pretty magical. And that's because today we are joined by a 13th generation farmer and mushroom expert turned entrepreneur and biohacker from Finland. You guys, I honestly could not make this stuff up if I wanted to. Now, through his company, For Sigmatic Foods, today's guest is working hard to bring a lot of that ancient wisdom about mushrooms and their nutritional and medicinal benefits back into the modern era. There are a ton of health benefits that most people don't know about, but which you're going to learn about in the coming hour. Beyond that, for every product that you buy from their company, they donate a portion of medicinal mushrooms to a cancer patient in need, which, if you ask me, is pretty damn cool. Now, since meeting this guest at Summit at Sea, I've actually been enjoying a ton of Four Sigmatic's products, and I have to say, I think there might really be something to what they're doing, and I'm really enjoying exploring the differences between the different types of magical potions that they offer, and I'm really enjoying getting behind them and the vision that they have for making the world a slightly better place. I want to make sure that you guys listen all the way to the end of this episode, and so I'm withholding a 15% coupon to any of their amazing products and free shipping over $100 if you listen all the way through to the end. By the way, before we go ahead and transition to the episode, I want to make one very small request from you guys, maybe two requests, and that is, let us know what you think. Send us a tweet on Twitter, send us a comment on the blog post, drop us an email. We know thousands of you guys are listening, but it can get a little bit lonely over here behind the microphone. So please do take a moment to share your feedback with us. And the second request is try and share that feedback publicly. If you can write us a review on iTunes or on Stitcher or wherever you're listening to this podcast, that definitely helps and will stymie some of the lonely, thankless feelings that we are getting over here, myself and the editing team. So please do take a moment today to take care of that. And so, without any further griping and without any further ado, let me introduce you to, and I'm going to try and pronounce this the best I can, Mr. Tero Isokauppila. Tero, my friend, how are you? It's been a while since I saw you last. How have you been?
Thanks, brother. I've been good. How about yourself?
Yeah, really good. Really excited for this. Since I met you, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, we got to get him on the show. So I'm excited that we finally did it. We followed up despite all the, post-conference stress, and we made it happen.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, it was quite the rush after Summit, but yeah, all good now.
Yeah, awesome. So let's give a little bit of background. As I said in the intro, I met you at Summit at Sea. I have to admit, First time I saw you, I go, okay, here's this tall Scandinavian guy, about a foot taller than me. I assumed you were an athlete, and then you pop out with, I'm a 13th generation mushroom farmer. So tell us about that and how you went from that into entrepreneurship. I have to say, this is probably one of the most unique bios I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I guess kind of like in your TED Talk, when you're like really excited about learning and kind of hyper, that's the entrepreneurship part of you, right? So you're just excited about a lot of stuff. So I guess that's my path to entrepreneurship as well. It's been a way of creating. I like consuming things, reading and stuff like that, but I also like creating. So the best way to create. And I grew up in Finland, Nokia. A lot of people think that Nokia was actually from Japan or whatnot, but it's a Finnish town, later became a mobile phone brand and technology company. So we have a farm there. We don't exactly know actually how long we've had it, but at least we're the 13th generation.
Wow. So that's like a couple hundred years your family's been in the farming of mushrooms.
We actually forage mushrooms. We farm rye. So it's more of, you don't actually, so we can go later into it, but there's a way of collecting mushrooms, but there's also a way of cultivating mushrooms. And those are two slightly different things. And then there's even the cultivation. There's few kinds of cultivation. So actually our farm is known for more like heirloom cows and rye. And then the mushroom is something that we get from the forest wild. So
interesting. Okay, so let's go into that a little bit. And I'll give people the background of saying Four Sigmatic Foods has a lot of power and a lot of meaning, and there's a very significant reason why it's called Four Sigmatic. So tell us a little bit about what the company does and why it's called that and what the mission is that you guys are trying to accomplish before we kind of dive into the mushrooms, if you will.
Yeah, well, Four Sigma is like the geekiest possible way of saying that we only represent like the most researched foods in the world, like about 50 most researched foods. So essentially, if you take any sciences, including natural sciences, a large enough sample size, it tends to form a bell curve, a normal distribution. And things away from the means, the standard deviations are called sigmas. So 4 sigmas away from all the foods in the world means that there's only about 50 of them in the world. But kind of like IQ or any other metric, people are outliers. So I guess in your world, the super learners or the super foods. So the add super means that they're like exceptional. So in this case, I mean, I don't like the word superfood, but I guess that's the most accurate thing you can say. So surprisingly, a lot of those 50 most researched foods, there's things that they're like ginseng or lemon, actually, ginger. But there's also a lot of these medicinal mushrooms or tree mushrooms that are really good for you. And we just want to focus on those foods. And our first mission is to help popularize the mushroom part of it.
Wow. Okay. So there are only 50 foods that represent, I know 6 Sigma is 1 in a million. So 4 Sigma means that like, it's really, really, it's kind of very isolated what foods are being researched. I didn't realize that there was so much research going on into these kinds of mushrooms, most of which I have to say, when I checked out your products, I've never heard of lion's mane. I've never heard of most of these kinds of mushrooms.
Yeah, well, you and many others. I started my first mushroom venture was about 10 years ago on my own. And still even like, let's say a year ago, and even still today, a lot of people just think of psychedelics or, your common white button mushroom when you talk about mushrooms. But actually they are a kingdom. They are a kingdom same way as animals are a kingdom,
right.
Plants are a kingdom. A lot of people still think that mushrooms are some kind of a subgroup of plants, but no, actually they're drastically different. And from a human being point of view, it's fascinating because they're our worst enemy and our best friend because we're very close. Humans and mushrooms actually belong to the same super kingdom and we're genetically very close to them. So we share almost half the same DNA as mushrooms. So We're very prone to mushroom illnesses. So we sometimes like molds and things like that. Those are also in the fungi kingdom, but we can also use the mushroom medicine way better than many other medicine. And that's why about 40% of pharmaceuticals are derived from mushrooms. So,
oh wow,
that's basically the reason why they're so studied is that the pharmaceutical companies fund a lot of that research.
I had no idea. I know, your basic penicillin is a mold. I didn't realize that so many drugs were being derived from fungi.
Yep.
Incredible. So what's the big deal with mushrooms? I know there are a lot of people in the audience, probably the majority of the audience, who has never heard of these different kinds. And they're probably asking, isn't the vast majority poisonous or illegal? What's special about mushrooms and why are they so powerful for medications? I mean, 40% is a huge number.
Yeah, well, the same way as the blue whale is different from a chihuahua, even though they're both animals and they're both mammals, is also to understand that there is a huge difference in between mushrooms. And some are poisonous, same way as some plants are poisonous. Same way as some animals are not suitable to be pets. A large part of animals are you can't domesticate them, or at least we haven't found a way yet, and hope we won't. But essentially, there's also, for the good kind of mushrooms, there's two types of mushrooms. One are more for culinary purpose, and they have some protein. So that's your normal portobello mushroom. And then there's these medicinal mushrooms, or more of these superfood mushrooms, and they tend to grow on trees. And what they're good for is the most of the research is based around cancer, actually, and immunomodulation. So people who might have cancer or autoimmune disorders. A super unsexy topic unless you're suffering from any autoimmune disorder. People usually don't care about immunomodulation, but it's directly related to our gut, and mushrooms help with our gut biome. And for a lot of your listeners as well, gut is related to our brain function and cognitive function. So that makes it more relevant. On top of it, a lot of the best mushrooms are adaptogenic. So they help with hormonal balance, so help lower stress, maybe improve oxygen intake, support your adrenal glands. So there's a lot of different functions, but most of the research is based on the immune system and therefore also in the gut biome.
Interesting. So tell me a bit about that research. I mean, I want to go into, I've poured through your website. I've really been enjoying the products myself, but I want to go in for our audience. If we could kind of say, well, here's this type of mushroom that you've never heard of, and it's been proven to do X, Y, and Z. Can you give us a few examples of those, maybe starting out with the lion's mane, which I've been enjoying so much, and going into different types and what they're known to be effective for?
Yeah, let's do a couple. I guess lion's mane is one that your audience and listeners will enjoy most, is because it's one of the few, nootropics, so smart drugs. So this is a food, not a supplement. It is actually a food, consumable thing that a lot of Oriental people, for example, use as a meat substitute. So people on a vegetarian diet want, because it tastes very much like meat once you cook it. But it also has these certain kinds of compounds that help repair and protect our nerve growth factors. And there's a compound that can penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So essentially help your brain and your nervous system function better. Original use in more of a medicinal purpose was for Parkinson and Alzheimer, but lately it's been used more because it's very interesting how it can help with cognitive function also in a daily basis. So we have a lot of customers who, for example, do memory games, and then they've tried it with and without lion's mane. And obviously there's more research to be done in that field, but it's definitely shown to be helping with cognitive function. And then another one that I could take is reishi mushroom, which is probably the most studied of the mushrooms, so Conoderma lucidum. And that's, again, has a lot of different functions. Interestingly, it works as an adaptogenic, so in our liver, helps break down stress a little bit. But all of the mushrooms have a common compound group called polysaccharides, especially these beta-glucans that get absorbed in our colon, and they help work out our own protective system, our shield, so our cytokines, and they work them in two-directional way. And these get absorbed in the colon, and therefore now new research shows, for example, there was a research made in San Francisco recently how reishi can help repair the gut biome part of it. But for a long time, we've known that those polysaccharides, which are one of the most studied groups in human medicine of all, get absorbed in the colon. So,
wow. And, am I correct in assuming, when you look at a lot of mushrooms, they grow in spores. Am I correct in assuming that growing them is really massively scalable, and it's also probably super sustainable? It's not like traditional crops where you have to invest all this sunlight, all this energy, all this fertilizer, till the soil. It kind of seems like these things are very rugged. And I'm looking at photos on Google Images right now of these lion's manes that are bigger than I am. Are these things durable and pretty sustainable to grow?
Yes. So a few fundamentals in fungi in general is that they grow everywhere in the world, including Antarctica. They essentially are extremophils. So a lot of the best, most studied foods in the world are one of the extremes. It's either foods that grow somewhere where nothing else grows. I guess a good example for you might be like olive. When there's a burned olive tree comes out or something like that.
Right.
Whereas a lot of these mushrooms are extremophiles, or at the end of the life cycle, when there's a tropical rainforest, which is so biodiverse that it has the best nutrients to grow the most amazing things. But in general, they're extremophiles. They don't require sunlight, and they can survive. A couple times, actually, mushrooms have essentially mastered the whole planet, because at one point there was a meteorite that essentially made a dust cloud that blocked the sun, and all the plants died. There was pre-humans and all the plants died, but the mushrooms survived. So mushrooms were the first thing to come from the sea to the surface of the land, and they could survive this because they don't need sunlight. So they're extremely durable, and they're extremophiles. As far as growing them, it's fascinating. If you ever walk in a forest or you see a mushroom and you kick it down, you actually don't hurt the mushroom. So collecting the mushroom part that you see, which is called the fruiting body, so the thing that pops from the ground, is actually not hurting the mushroom, because the mushroom is underground. Wherever you are right now, if you walk anywhere under the ground, there will be mushrooms. And this is the roots of the mushroom, which is called mycelium, which is the one that will survive. And this fruiting body is like the apple growing from the apple tree. So collecting it or leaving it there makes no impact. So the actual impact is on the mycelium. And the mycelium is good for the planet because it's like a cleaner of the forest. And it can clean oils and radiation. But the part that we want to eat is the fruiting body. So we want to eat the part that is actually visible from the ground or from the tree. But in the part of these medicinal mushrooms, the important part is that they're grown on trees. Now, lately, there have been a lot of mushrooms that are grown on laboratories on different like grains and substrains, which are not that good. A lot of the benefits of the mushrooms that, for example, we use come from the tree. So sometimes it would be almost like an ideal diet for us humans to eat soil and trees, but because they're not bioavailable in our body, we eat things that grow on the soil and we eat things that grow on trees. So a lot of the health benefits actually comes from the tree. So that's part of also how you naturally farm it.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of why our crops today are so poor. It's not because the crop itself is poor, it's because the soil that it's been growing in is just completely depleted.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And a lot of the genus and the species are then had to be, it's not always even GMO, but you use hybrid versions of different plants that are less durable, but easier to grow in large scale. So a lot of the heirloom varieties of anything, let's say potato, which we consider as, it's just a potato, but actually potato can be extremely nutrient dense if you just use varieties that would have more nutrients. But a lot of the more industrial versions of various plants tend to be less nutritious.
Right. So we covered the lion's mane, we covered the reishi. Are there any other mushrooms that you guys are not cultivating, but gathering that have significant health benefits that people should know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. I think from a simplicity point of view, our education is focused a lot on the four, kind of the most research and most unique mushrooms. So we talked about reishi, which is, all of them are great for the immune system, but reishi can also help with stress and sleep quality and liver. Lion's mane was brain, nervous system. Mm-hmm. Then there's a mushroom cordyceps, which in the United States is the most popular one, helps with adrenal fatigue, oxygen intake. A lot of people who do CrossFit, endurance athletes, triathletes, that kind of people use it because you can get more oxygen in your lungs. So according to studies, your amount of oxygen in your lungs gets 9 to 15% more.
Wow.
Now, obviously, even if you're not an athlete, oxygen is just a vital part for focus, for energy. So if you're ever tired and you feel like you need a big cup of coffee or whatever, just go outside, take a few big deep breaths, and usually a lot more alert and energized.
Wow.
But it helps with adrenal fatigue, energy, sport performance. And then there's a mushroom called chaga, which is the highest source of antioxidants, highest source of zinc. It's because of the antioxidants, it, besides helping with our immunity, it can help lower inflammation, really good for gut health, and then for skin, because it's also very high in melanin. And all of these compounds help protect our skin from the inside out. Skin is our biggest organ, but it's usually the last place to get nutrients. So one of the easiest way to know if somebody's also healthy is looking at their skin quality. Skin reflects a lot of holistic health aspects in our body. So
I love it. And I love, by the way, on your website, you make it simple because a lot of these things, you know, people are wondering, are they safe? People are wondering, what do they do? You almost feel like you have to be a botanist. just listening to you talking about all these different receptors and how things work, you guys make it very simple. Here's the reishi: reduce stress, deeper sleep, lion's mane, improve cognitive performance, cordyceps, energy. I love how approachable you guys have made experimentation with these different foods.
Thanks. I mean, it's definitely not easy. I guess related to your own field it's like a balance, right? You want to be on top of the science part. You want to be focused on that, like what's proven right now. You also want to focus on applied sciences, so what has worked in practice. People don't have time for that either. So you have to break it down into smaller pieces, even like oversimplify it a bit so people can kind of get it and start using. And then the people who are really into it can study, the ins and outs of it. But it's a hard balance. Like, how do you, because there's, especially with food and supplements, there's so many like snake oil type things that like just promise a lot of stuff. And there's like no research on it. And that was kind of why we chose 4 Sigma as well, is a kind of a quest to focus on the more research foods. But it's hard to make it, not everything in the world is bullet sizable, but you should try to make it bullet sizable for a lot of people. So it's a balancing act.
Absolutely. Now, I assume a lot of these mushrooms, I mean, I've never looked, but I've never seen, chaga or cordyceps in the grocery store. Are a lot of these foods available in people's local markets, or is this something that, despite the research, has just not made it into traditional kind of supply chains?
In Oriental countries, they're extremely available. In more Western countries, it really depends on which of the mushrooms we're talking about. Like I said, a lot of these medicinal mushrooms are actually grown in trees, so they're inedible mushrooms. So you have to cook them like you would do bone broth. So they're not bioavailable raw. You can't eat them raw, mushrooms in general. They're not really meant for it. So they're not usually sold in the grocery store with the more edible mushrooms, the portobello mushrooms. There's a couple crossover products. So if you go to a grocery store, I would recommend looking into mushrooms like maitake, also known as hen of the woods, or shiitake. So maitake and shiitake are mushrooms that you might find in your normal grocery store, or oyster mushroom. These 3 are probably more available mushrooms that would have some of these polysaccharides and would be really good for your health, but also more available in a traditional grocery store. But in today's online world, we can buy these pretty much anywhere in the world. So
exactly. So I do want to get into that because, as I said, I have really been enjoying. I actually first tried your products out at Summit at Sea. Someone there was this non-alcoholic bar, and someone was like, "Oh, here's a chaga mushroom tea," as opposed to having a margarita. So I've been experimenting and really enjoying the products a lot since then. But I wanted to ask, where would you recommend that someone start if they want to try and test the experience and the benefits of these mushrooms? What's a good entry-level mushroom to try and see how they feel?
Yeah, well, I'll give you 2 answers. Like, obviously, here comes the super biased part that it's our company. Like, I left the mushroom field for a while and I came back for it because I saw that they work and they're so powerful and they're so studied. But the problem with them is the best mushrooms are kind of hard to use because they're inedible. So there's a certain amount of processing of hot water extraction, alcohol extraction required. And they also, once you do the real thing, a lot of the products on the market are actually, like I said, grown on labs and not that high quality. But once you have the real high quality stuff, they taste pretty bad. They're very bitter. And a lot of people, especially like reishi mushroom, a lot of people don't like it, even though it's a good thing to gradually learn yourself to enjoy bitter flavors again. So we make mushroom coffee, mushroom hot chocolate, because cacao and coffee bean are flavors that people like and they enjoy it. They're bitter as well, but they're bitter flavors that people would like. So we try to make it easy. They come in easy to use packets. So my first answer is our products. But beyond that, I think looking at your local grocery store, looking for shiitake, maitake, oyster mushroom, or going foraging. So looking at your area and contacting a group of people who are into mushrooms. There is a mycological associations pretty much around the world. So actually getting mushrooms from the wild is possible almost anywhere in the world. So contacting somebody in your community who's really into it, who can maybe take you to the forest and maybe you can find something together. Or, it doesn't even have to be a forest where you can find them. So
that's really cool. That's really, really cool. I appreciate the candid answer. Feel free to tell people what product they should try out. I don't recommend every product on the show. And when I do, have someone come in and talk about their products, it's a product that I've tried and a product that I stand by. So where would people start? Personally, I have to say of all of them, I haven't tried every product. I'm really enjoying the Lion's Mane. And I actually you sent me this other product, which I think is no longer on the website now, which is the kind of mind boosting nootropic one. But I didn't realize the Lion's Mane was. And then, I kind of just took out the packet and put it in the hot water and drank it and thought that it was kind of one of these relaxing ones. And then I realized I was super, super focused. So that's personally my favorite. Which one do you find yourself drinking the most?
It's really fascinating. Like we've now been selling these in about 27 countries and we ship online to, 40, 50 countries. And we get this feedback. And it's really funny is like there are some bestsellers, but in general, it really varies a lot. And I think it comes down to the fact that we gravitate towards products that we need or our body craves.
Sure.
Right? So I just say like you can go to our website or we have also free information there about mushrooms in general and superfoods. So just find like things that you kind of like see and catches your eye and go with that first. I think the intuitive part of it is really like subconscious part of it. It's really important.
Right.
I think if you're in doubt, start with reishi mushroom. It's really the most studied and probably the most versatile of them all. And work from there. I think for your audience, Lion's Mane is definitely an interesting one. So read more about that. It's also a very pleasant flavor compared to a lot of the others. So it's an easy compliance part if you're not used to taking more bitter products. And it's also fascinating because there's not that many natural foods that actually produce these kind of nootropic, brain boosting, cognitive function boosting benefits. You can find like products that would do the same thing as cordyceps, so sport performance or sexual energy or adrenal support. There's a few of them. You have a pool of 10 to 15 things you can choose from. But for the brain function, there's really only a couple things that I've known that would help the nerve growth factor element. So things like certain algae, chlorella, growth factor might do it. But there's only like 2 or 3 things that will really work on that in the kind of whole food world. So I think the Lion's Mane is definitely very fascinating. I think the coffee part is definitely our bestseller. So a lot of people like coffee. They feel a little guilty about drinking coffee. So our mushroom coffee is definitely our bestseller.
I love that. I do want to ask, actually, now that we circled back nicely to the nootropics. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of nootropics. We've done a lot of episodes on them and I'm a big, big advocate of them. I don't know if you know, I know I'm asking kind of a cognitive neuroscience question, but how exactly is Lion's Mane influencing the brain?
Yeah. So essentially, some of the functions we know, some of the functions we don't know. Even in the Latin name of Lion's Mane mushroom, it has a lot of different names in different countries, but it's this, and I'm probably going to always pronounce it incorrectly, but there's these heroisones, HERICENONES, and then these erinacase, ERINACINES. And these are compounds that we so far know that are the active things, but there might be things that we don't yet know. It's still like fairly new thing. But at least these 2 compounds essentially stimulate the nerve growth factor. So they're molecules, super small, and they actually stimulate the nerve growth factor production. And then there's these blood-brain barrier. There's these compounds, I think they're amyloids or something like that in the brain that these 2 mentioned compounds help penetrate, essentially improving the flow of information between the brain and the nervous system.
Oh, wow.
We have a couple studies. So there's research papers on our website. We have like these scientific summaries of existing research that is in the world. So you can read about that. There is also a Huffington Post article. There's a couple really interesting. There's one Japanese study I remember. And there's, I think, one Chinese study on the cognitive function. And you can check out those.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely link those in the blog post.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the hardest for me is definitely the brain part, even though my first degree was in chemistry and I've tried to research these, but it's really, that part is so complex. I think like you have to dedicate your whole life just to understand that.
Sure.
And I'm come from a farmer's background. If people are really into the nootropic field and are used to reading these research papers, I would highly recommend it. But it's definitely related to the nerve growth factor and the stimulation of neurons.
Sure. I'm sorry to blindside you there with the cognitive science question because, I think, like you said, there's so much research being done about these substances. And even still, I mean, I had an interview today where the person said, we don't actually know how it works. We know in double-blind studies that it works. And he and I both concluded that we actually know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the actual functions of the brain. And so it's one thing to say, okay, caffeine blocks these receptors, and that's really easy to know, but to actually know what is promoting neurogenesis, what's actually improving the synaptic connections of the brain, we haven't even gotten close to understanding how that works.
Yeah, I remember kind of like, I think 80s, I took my mom's class and they said, if you have a glass of beer or a glass of wine and you kill your brain cells, you never get them back. And that's not too long time ago. Like really, it seems like 90s was the decade of the brain research. And it seems like the brain is still, compared to a lot of our organs or blood circulation or muscular system, brain and the nervous system seems to be like the new frontier of research. But definitely look into our site, foursigmafoods.com/science, or we'll link up the stuff, some of the research. You can read about what the current studies say, how it actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also what can be potentially interesting is, we've done recently an episode on nootropics with Jesse Lawler, and just talking about this different idea that everyone's brain really works differently. And that, something that was working really well for him doesn't work at all for me. And so this idea of mixing and matching different substances, you guys are mixing the caffeine of coffee with the kind of neurogenetic properties of lion's mane and stuff like that. I think there's just so much fun N=1 kind of safe experimentation that consumers can do and say, hey, I'm going to pick up a box of these drinks and see how they respond. And for one person, it might do incredible things. And for another, it might just be a bitter drink that they kind of don't notice the effect of.
Yeah, it definitely. And by the way, coffee is quite the powerful nootropic as well. Sometimes when I didn't drink coffee at all and I would have a long drive, like I had to drive long distance on a car and stay alert, I would sometimes just buy coffee and put it on the center console and just put the air conditioning inside the car and just smell it. And that would give me an alert feeling.
Interesting.
Could be placebo totally, but I felt alert. And same with sometimes I smell coffee beans and that gives me an also sensation of like focus, which also seems odd, but it works. So I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. Although I do have to say, I'm on a little bit of a crusade against just regular coffee because, as a quote unquote nootropic, it actually doesn't qualify because it's habit forming and because it has side effects. Like quote unquote, the side effects of coffee make it more dangerous and less qualified than something like, you mentioned ginseng before.
Yeah.
So I'm all about this whole lion's mane thing. I'm all about yerba mate. I'm all about green tea. Again, for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned the mushrooms. It's like coffee has some antioxidants, but not nearly as many. And it's certainly not going to stimulate, these amazing things that a lion's mane apparently does, new formation of synapses and stuff like that.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Cool.
I mean, coffee it's a fun thing every now and then, but it's definitely not a daily thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, which of the products do you consume every day?
I'm a lot on experimental diets. And just today was the last time when our chef gave me a random bag of something new, a new flavor combo. So I'm a lot of trying those. I think in general, I'm pretty energetic and I get a lot of stimulants from the world and what the world I live in. And I meet a lot of cool people and I get excited. So I'm a believer in yin and yang as a principle of balance. So wherever you are in life, your needs might be different. So you said that what works for me might not work for you, but also understanding that what worked for me when I was 20 might not work for me when I'm 30 or 40.
Sure.
So right now I'm traveling a lot, really hectic. So reishi is something that I constantly gravitate towards. Another thing is the chaga mushroom because of the anti-inflammatory properties. And I'm a lot on the airplane, which I call the fart tube. So it's really like a world that I'm right now in. Might not be the healthiest world to, be in the airplane and travel a lot, but that's where I am at with my mission around the mushrooms. So chaga mushroom helps with inflammation and just, keep me healthy. The cost of being one day sick, or it's a total bummer, but it also affects my daily life quite a lot. So I definitely don't want to be sick. So chaga and reishi are probably the ones that I'm consuming the most right now.
Awesome. And you said there's also digestive benefits around that and improving the gut flora, introducing new flora to the body.
Yeah, the chaga is originally a Russian name. A lot of the original research on chaga mushroom comes from Russia. There's a lot of, it's actually accepted in certain pharmaceuticals as well there. But a lot of the usage there is for different gut problems and even gut-related cancers. So it's definitely gentle for the stomach, very by the way, just by itself, a great coffee substitute, really gentle for the stomach, better pH, just a great person taste. It was used as a coffee substitute during Second World War when there was a lack of coffee beans. So there's somewhat of a flavor. It's like a really burned, tastes like campfire. It's like a really burnt coffee flavor. So not maybe for the coffee connoisseurs out there, but it's a great substitute, really helps to replenish your body. And we combine it with Siberian ginseng, which is great for adrenals as well. So we have a chaga elixir, which is great for people who want to completely cut out on caffeine, but still kind of crave for that bitter, or even the habit. A lot of people who drink the coffee, they just want the habit. So it's a great way to, instead of trying to kill the habit, just upgrade it or replace it with something similar, like drinking good tea or having a chaga. So
right. All right. I'm going to have to go to your website and order that one because I didn't order that one. I only ordered really the ones that were at Summit at Sea. So, all right. I need to get on this. Awesome. I'm just picking through the website. Let me ask you another question, Tero, which is, I learned a really, really fun fact while I was researching you for this episode. It's a little bit stalkerish, but apparently you spend over $20,000 a year on Whole Foods. First of all, wow. But second of all, I know that Finland is very expensive, but I'm not sure how you do that. Tell me about that.
It's probably up from that.
Oh my God.
It's closer to 30, 40, which is a real bummer because I know a lot of entrepreneurs. So I get really I can buy wholesale or sometimes get them even for free. But I mean, first and foremost, it's curiosity. I'm really whenever I see something new, I'm excited about it. I'm interested in it. Also, for those people who think that's a huge amount of money, I just want to give kind of two thoughts around that. One is how much we spend on healthcare, how much we spend on pharmaceuticals at the end in our lifetime. Mm-hmm. That actually might not be that big of a amount. And also the other part that I want people to understand is a lot of those things don't work. So there are people in the world in every field, quote unquote experts, who study or go through a lot of materials. In my case, try a lot of stuff for health or health foods. And they're experts because they've gone through a lot of volume, but they get paid because they will tell you everything in a few sentences. So it's almost like the ancient Greek philosophers who would tell you how to reach eudaimonia or a good life or a positive world, kind of those life principles in every culture. So the same thing in this, a lot of the stuff I spend money on, I would not recommend to other people. And the funny part is that when you have a kind of a new thing, a new product, usually the margins are just ridiculous. So you end up paying for hundreds of dollars of something that should only cost $10, $20, but there's not enough demand, or because it's so new, they have a huge markup. So I end up paying way too much for some things, but that's in the pursuit of finding 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30 things that actually bring me awesome results.
Right. And I understand that, probably a lot of that for you is a tax deduction because it's research. If you guys are looking really for foods in general, not just mushrooms, it's really competitive research for you guys, I would hope.
Yeah. But there's also a lot of stuff I buy and then I have to donate it to someone because it's just not for me. So
it's not for you. Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
Tero, I want to ask if people want to learn more about these magical mushrooms, if you will, and not the kind of magical mushrooms that most of us encounter in university, what's a good book or some good resources or blogs that people could read and check out?
Again, depends on how much time you're willing to donate for this. I think a good, easy way to start is to visit our website, download some of these, or just browse through, skim through. If you want to give a time to watch 1 or 2 TED Talks, there's an interesting guy called Paul Stamets. So if you go and there's a talk, I think 6 ways how mushrooms can save the world, that might be worth your time if you're willing to invest about 15 minutes to it. Mm-hmm. He also has other talks, fairly fascinating. He also has a book, but it's a very good beginner's book. It's called Mycelium Running. You can get that on Amazon, for example. fairly affordable. Those are great ways to start. If you want to then look into a bigger part of the fungi world, a great book about that is Mushrooms Demystified. And then what would I say? Like, I think that was David Aurora, Mushrooms Demystified. And that's a big book. That's a lot to cover. And if you could go even through 1/10 of it, you'll be almost a mushroom expert.
Awesome.
Those are good books. And then I would say that I would study, just out of curiosity, if you're into the mushroom world, I would study kind of the history of psilocybin and the psychedelics. Even if you're not into it at all, it kind of gives you a better understanding of how the mushrooms work. And I would also, if you want to entertain yourself, I would Google Santa Claus and mushrooms and learn more about the history of Santa Claus and how it's related to mushrooms.
Cool. That's a nice kind of surprise for people to play with at home. Tero, I know you guys were very generous to offer a 15% off discount for anyone who purchases through the Becoming Superhuman podcast. So we're definitely going to be putting a link to that in the podcast episode if people want to check it out, or if they want to go to jle.vi/mushrooms, and that will take them directly to a page with the appropriate coupon coded link so they can save 15%. Anything else you'd want them to check out website wise, get in touch with you, your handle on Twitter, any of that kind of stuff?
People are smart. They will find me if you need it. But I just want to say is like understanding of, I think it's a Sanskrit thing. It's from India called neti neti, which means not this, not that. Kind of what we discussed, that what works for me might not work for you, and what worked for you 10 years ago might not work for you right now, is understanding the gray area. And I think mushrooms have suffered a lot from this black and white thinking. It suffered from this food racism, same way as for a long time we were scared of bacteria, even though we are bacteria.
Right.
So I just want to ask people to have an open mind, give mushrooms a chance, and just like explore them more. They're a huge kingdom. They're part of everything we do on this planet, and just educating yourself a little bit on it. It's good for common sense, but also might give you some aha moments on some other fields that you're interested in, because there's a lot of linkages. So hopefully everybody could just give like that 15 to 30 minutes at least to give mushrooms a chance and read a little bit more about them. And then maybe that will give some aha moments.
Beautiful. Mr. Tero, thank you very, very much. It's been such a pleasure reconnecting with you, and I'm sure we will stay in touch. Hopefully I'll see you also next year at Summit at Sea.
For sure. And hopefully before that somewhere else.
Yeah, that would be great. Let's do keep in touch. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks a lot.
All right, my friend. Take care.
All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really, really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody, or you are somebody, or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.